Moving right along to our last set of notes in development, Unit 9, we're going to talk about adulthood all the way through the end of life. And there's quite a few different things to talk about here. Early and middle adulthood, so 20 through the age of 65, meaning before the end, right? So social development. Early adulthood is often centered around careers, okay? And being that generativity side of it all, right? The generativity versus stagnation, like we talked about with Erickson. There's a midlife transition, and it occurs in a person's 20s when one may question his or her life and accomplishments. This is due mainly because of physical changes that are going on and the idea that life will end at some point. And no, it might not be tomorrow, but in that you have probably less life to live than you have lived. However, for most, the passage into middle age is relatively calm. Many, instead of focusing on the past or the future, they focus on the present, and they come to terms with what they're doing with their lives right now. Marriage, children, and family are very much a big thing going on in adulthood. People are still getting married, but rates of living together as well and divorce are higher. While the institution of marriage is changing, around 90% of heterosexual adults will marry, and about 75% of divorcees will remarry. And about 50% of first marriages are ending in divorce. And we could talk all day about that statistic of first marriages and how they calculate that 50%. But I don't want it to skew your picture of marriage, especially when it says that 75% of those who divorce eventually remarry. It doesn't sour marriage for them. Let's talk about women's roles. Close to 75% of all married women with school-age children are working outside of the home. Most working women are coming home to do the majority of the housework, like a second shift, you can say. According to sociologist Arlie Hochschild, employed mothers put in an extra month of 24-hour days during the course of a year. Interesting. Yet most women who work report a personal satisfaction and sense of contributing to society. In late adulthood, this is 65 plus, there's some physical changes. Many physical changes in late adulthood, like thinning and graying hair, skin wrinkling, a slight loss of height. Senses are less sensitive, reaction time slows, changes in physical stamina. So think of like your grandparents, they probably put a lot of seasoning and salt and pepper on their food. That's because their senses are less sensitive. It's harder for them to taste. What causes these changes? There's genetic programming theories of aging, and that there's a built-in time limit to the reproduction of human cells. It's kind of like an automatic self-destruct button has been pushed. Seems very doomsday-ish. But then there's the wear and tear theory of aging. There's mechanical functions of the body simply stop working efficiently as people age. I mean, gravity alone starts taking over, so it causes lots of different things. Cognitive changes. Some declines in intellectual functioning during late adulthood. Skills relating to fluid intelligence do show declines in old age. And we're going to talk about this more in Unit 11 with intelligence, but fluid being responsiveness in new situations. Yet skills relating to crystallized intelligence remain steady as long as there is normal cognitive ability. And this is wisdom, the accumulation of knowledge. I mean, they've lived a long time. Of course they have more crystallized intelligence. Does memory really decline with old age? Most evidence says not really. Neural processing does slow down, but not the memories themselves. So it takes them longer to process the memories, but the memories themselves are still there. Most memory loss tends to be limited to episodic memory, because they've been through so much, there's a lot of interference. Other types are largely unaffected by age. If a person stays active physically and mentally, the memory loss seems almost non-existent. So that's something to consider. Some memory loss is due to disease, like Alzheimer's disease. The social world, how does one successfully age? The disengagement theory of aging says that aging produces a gradual withdrawal from the world on physical, psychological, and social levels. and that this isn't a bad thing necessarily. Disengagement provides opportunity for increased reflectiveness, decreased emotional investment in others at a time of life when social relationships will inevitably be ending soon. Maybe not tomorrow, but in some years, right? By death. The activity theory of age, people who age most successfully are those who maintain the interests, activities, and level of social interaction they experienced during middle adulthood. So late adulthood should reflect a continuation as much as possible of the activities in which people participated during earlier parts of their lives when they were really thriving, right? And which is better, it just depends on the individual and their personality. And we all still have personalities even when we're over 65. Elisabeth Kubler-Ross is a name to remember here with the stages of death and dying, or the stages of grief. She spent much of her career studying tragedy, death and dying, and the cycle of grief as it relates to those events. She says that all people facing death or grief experience in no particular order these 5 things. Again, in no particular order: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I'm sure you can gather what each of these mean. You can see these stages when dealing with many of the traumas we encounter in life: death of a loved one, learning of a terminal illness, and lots of other forms of loss, like the ending of a relationship. You can see all of these happening.